Hello everybody and welcome. I'm Matt, Senior Client Success Manager for White House Custom Color. And before we start talking with Shelly, I just want to make a couple quick announcements here. If you haven't hit the subscribe button on our WHCC YouTube, make sure and do that so you get notified of cool events like what we're doing right now in the future. Hit the follow on Instagram at WHCC Pro, and for all of your product questions, details, options, all the great stuff that WHCC has to offer, hit up WHCC.com. And if you do have questions for Shelly while we're going along today, make sure and put them into the chat. If you're watching this on the rewind, go ahead and put them into the comments, and if we can track her down, which I know we can, we will get those answered for you. So make sure and ask those questions if you do have them. So first of all, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I feel like I shouldn't tell everybody the secret of how well you treat people because you'll have everybody calling trying to be here with you guys. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us more about Shelly. You are such an interesting person. You've been with us since about 10 o'clock this morning, and you and I have talked several times, but just listening to your background and how you create your art is just so fun. Can you give us and the people who are listening just a little bit more information about you?
About
like where you're from. Tell us about who you are and a little bit about your art, because I'm going to ask you, at least 4 hours of questions today.
Well, I am originally from Minnesota. I was born in Rochester, so I grew up mostly going to school in Farmington, Minnesota, and I loved art classes. That was my favorite. And then my family moved off to Colorado, and I kind of moved all around. I was in Nashville for a while, and I actually was a booking agent there. And so that feels like
learned that. I didn't
feels
know
like
that
another
before.
Lifetime, yeah. So I worked for Pro Tours, booking large tours across the country, but I also booked for different venues, smaller venues.
Cool.
I was at a recording industry school by accident. It was just one of the top 300 best schools for a bargain, basically. But I just wanted to get out of the cold.
Right.
And Nashville
Can't
sounded...
imagine why.
Yeah, Nashville sounded nice, so then I just sort of landed in that. I loved music, so I would go to all the concerts, and then somehow that just fell in my lap. So I did that for a while, and I kind of boomeranged back to Minnesota a lot because I have family and friends here, but I've lived in Costa Rica, I've lived in London. I spent most of my adult career as a social worker. So I guess I think of myself as a social worker still. And then art still feels pretty new to me in a way. But I've been doing, probably focusing more on art as a career now in the last 5 to 8 years, I guess.
Awesome. And you are currently in South Padre.
I currently live in South Padre Island, Texas. That's right.
That's awesome. And so before we get into all of our questions, I want to start with the gallery and your business of art. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your gallery. First of all, like the physical space. Yeah. Because you refer to it as a barn.
A boat barn.
A boat barn.
Yeah.
But the pictures from the inside of it that I think Lucas is going to show us look very, very nice in comparison to describing it as a boat barn.
Yeah. So, South Padre Island, it's a tourist destination. It's also been a retirement community for a long time. And there's a big wave of Minnesotans that go there. That's really how I found it. I have an aunt and uncle that had bought a condo years back and found my way to visit, and then have always sort of loved it and visited there frequently, partly because free vacation. Right. Helps to know people, but then around the time of COVID, there was a natural opening for me to start a business, and I was initially in that space that I'm in now, where the gallery is just as a studio space. I just needed a place to get messy and where it wasn't going to bother anybody around me, and make some large pieces of art. So it's a marina barn. It stores boats. But there was an open space where there were some other artists in there working. And then I think because of COVID, I don't know, they just weren't coming in as much and asked me to take over the lease. But we were sharing the space with, an occasional raccoon or a crab running through, or maybe some mice. So,
Right.
you know, there were times where I was like, I'm just gonna make this art and get out of here, or I'd have to make sure I was putting the, you know, paintings up on a table to dry and hoping
You didn't
nobody
have a
got into
raccoon
them.
walking
I
across
didn't have a
it.
gecko stuck in it in the morning. Yeah.
Well,
So that's the space. It is an old boat barn, and a lot of it is, you know, overrun with kind of animals and things like that. So
yeah, for sure. So we are displaying, we have 7 of your pieces behind us here on the wall, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Shelly's work, you should check it out. I mean, the detail and the color and the saturation, and we're not even looking at the originals here. You know, these are printed out
pretty
smooth matte-
close though.
Yeah, smooth matte fine art paper, and they look gorgeous. But tell us a little bit about your techniques.
Okay.
Because on our call, and this is a direct quote from Shelly Hamsa, acrylic pours and messy stuff.
Yeah.
Is how you described it.
It's messy. So previously, I had been creating artwork that was just commission-based mainly. I was putting some artwork into different facilities, which I think we'll talk about later, and I just wanted to create artwork that they loved. So I didn't really care what I made. If somebody said paint a butterfly, I would just paint a butterfly. My only thought was that I wanted it to really be as well done as possible and technically perfect and look like a butterfly. So in that sense, I wasn't really, I don't feel like painting for me, I was painting for somebody else, and I just wanted it to do that justice.
Yeah.
And I would get really upset if like a hair was out of place, and I was really, and then I had somebody say to me, you should just get jiggy with it and not try to have so much control. And they suggested painting over a piece that I was like halfway through, and I was like, what? I've worked so hard on that. And then I was in the lobby where one of my pieces was hanging, and I overheard someone say, I really like that photograph on the 23rd floor, which was a painting I had done. So in one sense, it's very much a compliment, but I thought, why am I trying so hard to make it look like a photograph when it could just be a painting, and I could probably loosen up and have more fun.
Right.
So that led to trying a technique that you don't have a lot of control. You're pouring paint. So an acrylic pour is a technique where you take a water-based paint, and there's different recipes. People add different things to it. I add a silicone oil.
Okay.
Some people add rubbing alcohol. Some people add Minwax. I mean, there's all different things that people will add to it, but I really liked just adding the silicone oil.
Okay.
And you know, then that oil water barrier, so you can have a bunch of different cups full of different colored paints, and when you pour them all together, you can kind of swirl them, and they're all gonna they'll look like an oil slick. They're not gonna create a new color like brown or black, unless you really worked at it, you know, but.
Yeah. That's so cool. Like my controlling brain to think about what you're, I couldn't do it. I'd have to be perfect with it.
You know,
all the
that's kind of
time.
how I was. And then when I started working with acrylic pour, I really thought it was sort of like a popular thing and more kind of seen as being a little bit more crafty than, you know, for some folks that are like purists would say that's not art. But I honestly just, I may not always do acrylic pouring the rest of my life, but I really love it. And I love that just giving up control and kind of seeing what happens. So it's been great. It's good for me.
Well, and the style fits very perfectly with where you're located too, you know, and the vibe and everything. Yeah. So during our conversation, we talked about you pausing and really understanding and listening to the universe and being okay with reflecting on what really it is that you should be doing. And I was surprised, and I think you'll be surprised, to hear that really this is not all of it, but a lot of it has come to fruition in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, and that surprised me. Based on your art, I thought it would have been much, much longer than that. But looking back, like, how did COVID really impact your art and your life? Like, can you put that into words?
You know, I think there's 2 different times in my life where I paused. And one was when my grandparents got sick and I was living in London. And so I came back to take care of them. And that just created a natural pause. And to fill that time, you know, between Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy,
Right.
and taking them to doctor's appointments, I just really wanted to paint. And so I did that, and so that kind of filled a time of reflection and pause, because it wasn't really, forced. And then I think COVID was another time where, there was a lot of things that were very negative about COVID, but there were some things that were also positive.
Yeah.
And for me, it was an opportunity to adjust my life and to look at what did I really want to be doing. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I was starting to make very good money anyway, more than I had made before at my career. And, I basically just started over. And I just had an opportunity to come to a residency program in Texas, and took that opportunity. Right before that, and I don't know if I shared this with you, I was really trying to figure out what are my next steps in life. I was just like, I've got to figure this out, I got to figure it out. And it was stressing me out. And then I would say it was kind of like I had a dream, or it was right when I was waking up. I remember this thought of, you'll just be invited. It was just kind of an odd thought that popped into my head, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird, I don't know what to think about that. And then I opened up my email messages, and I hadn't heard from the residency program, and I just thought that was over and done with, and it said, you are invited.
Oh, wow.
And so then it started to feel a lot more synchronistic.
Right.
And so
that's so cool. And another wonderful artist that we love, Christy Abbott from Minneapolis, she went to South Padre.
Yeah.
And you guys did that together.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
So then after I got accepted into the program, I hadn't talked to Christine a little bit, and then we were catching up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. What are you doing? She's like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I'm coming with you. And I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So you've mentioned a couple times your previous career in social work.
Yes.
I know, just from talking to you and knowing your story, or at least knowing part of your story, that had a big impact on who you are.
Yes.
And your direction. So with that being said, how did that lead into like your giving side and to the nonprofit and the ways that you live your life now, being in social work in comparison to your art and your giving back now?
I do have a kind of a strong value that my life should be of service to others. So, and I definitely want my art to be that. But so I was naturally drawn to social work.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I'm so happy I did follow that career path. I sometimes wonder who I'd be if I hadn't. I just feel like it's just really shaped me and made me have so much empathy for folks. And so I'm really happy I did that. But I also feel like working with artists, they need nurturing,
yes.
Especially when they're starting their careers out. And, the world's hard. It's kind of hard for dreamers too,
yes.
Which I feel like a lot of artists are. They're trying to make their way in a world that doesn't always value or appreciate them. We are, as a culture, driven a lot of times by the monetary value. And so the creatives, I feel like they have the most important job in the world. That's just my belief. I think we have a lot of information, we have a lot of misinformation, but we don't always have enough inspiration, and we sometimes drown it out with letting everything else get super noisy. So if I can help artists be heard, that really feels good to me. So I really love that role, and I love, kind of feel like in a way I'm still a social worker, helping support other artists that are in my gallery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you said that perfectly, because that's how I would piece that together, especially with your gallery. And the conversations we've had already today about, the South Padre becoming more of a center, for art and making that such a big piece, and you being a part of that from the beginning. Or close to the beginning, that's really cool, and you're encouraging and building that community there. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one other thing, as a social worker, I oftentimes would take folks to like a homeless shelter, because that's where they needed to go, or I would take them, to a children's shelter or to a detox center. And I think in those moments of transition, I really feel like oftentimes people are sort of having a breakdown that becomes a breakthrough, but heading into a detox center, I really felt like that should be a place of healing, and there should be a lot of value in that, and the people going in there should feel respected, even if it's being done sort of against their will. That then once they get there, it should feel like a safe, wonderful, beautiful space that reflects who they are as human beings. And that was one thing as a social worker. I was going into a lot of these places and feeling like they just didn't have that because they lacked the budgets. So that's when Christy and I started to organize artists. But I would feel like that is my social work side too, of wanting to put artwork in spaces. And I think, I guess in a way, that's why I also want to mentor artists and also give away art, give away art when it's to be donated or it'll raise money for something. Yeah. So I see that all tying into the social work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can remember when we were talking on our call leading up to this, you said it was important to me that the art was in the facilities, but then you also said, it was important for you that the artist did get paid for this too.
Yes.
And for that to happen, you had to have the nonprofit to be able to have artists be paid.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not just about going into a space and being like, I just want to hang beautiful pieces up in here. You did a lot of work. You created a nonprofit. You worked with another wonderful human being to make the experience of being in a center that might at the time feel really, really bad, a more comfortable experience.
Yeah, and I would say, Christy and I, we didn't do it alone because we really organized artists. And I felt like most artists just want their artwork to be appreciated, Yeah. They want it to be in a space that people will see it and love it. So it was just a really, it worked out. But I did want those artists to get paid too. I felt like everyone should get valued in that.
Yeah, for sure. So if we talk about kind of the beginning of Shelly Hamsa, what would somebody be surprised to hear you say your first projects were that you painted on?
My first projects that I painted,
the
surfboards. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I love this. So when we were talking, you said, surprisingly, there's a company in Minnesota that was making surfboards and shipping them to
Australia and Hawaii.
That's surprising living in Minnesota.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Yeah, custom surfboards. It's idle surfboards. I don't know if they still are in existence now. It's been a while since I've worked with those guys. But yeah, so when I was taking care of my grandparents, I was creating art. I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't in a place where I was going to sell anything. And it was all sort of ocean and surfing art because I had been living in Costa Rica, I suppose.
Yep.
So I rang those guys up and asked them if I could just give them some surf art, and then they were like, no, but one of our guys makes these custom surfboards, and he really needs somebody to do custom artwork. And so that just led into that, kind of fell into my lap. So I started painting custom surfboards.
That's awesome. And then the rest has just kind
of history, as they say.
Yeah, it's history, but a lot to come too, which is fantastic. So where you're at in South Padre, something that I did not know, that we've been talking about a lot today, is the connection with science and art.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah, and the fact that SpaceX is your neighbor.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
And I think in your words, you said if you go out your front door.
It's right off to the right. You can see the launch pads and you can see some of their big buildings. Yeah. And they're on Boca Chica beach. And then we have a park down at our end too. So our gallery's at the south end of the island. It's in the marina right by a channel. So if you just look across the channel, you'll see SpaceX off there.
Yeah. So how has that helped the art community? Or how is that helping? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Well, I do think there is a tie between folks that are really interested in science and also appreciate art. And I don't know why that is even. I don't necessarily have all those answers, but I just know that it's true. So when there's this whole group of space tourists that come in whenever a launch is going to happen, and those are some of our busiest times. That's when we sell a lot of art and kind of our most expensive pieces too. So that's one thing that I found really cool. And then we are now a preferred vendor of SpaceX, where I think for retention reasons, they want to, they're really isolated there, and they're bringing folks in from California and all over the world to work there that are very specialized. But then when they get there, it's pretty isolated. It was a state park prior to them building there, so there's not a lot around. And so they're trying to really bring in art classes, yoga classes, and music and all of those things. But one thing that I've found is that even before the SpaceX started bringing us over, our classes started to fill up with folks from SpaceX. So they were just naturally interested in taking some art classes. So
that's super cool.
Yeah, that was really nice.
So when you're doing those classes then, Shelly, are they coming to the gallery or are you going to them?
Well, now under the contract, I go there. Or
Okay.
if they have an off-site location, I would go off-site. But for the most part, it's there on their Starbase. Is what it's called.
So cool.
So cool. So cool.
It's such an interesting comparison of science and art and,
Yeah.
and how that is helping the business,
Yeah.
and helping you as an artist. So the next two things we're going to talk about are kind of uniquely tied together. So when you have somebody that's listening along today that is an artist, that is creating, beautiful original pieces, but as an artist and as a human being, we all only have so many hours in our day.
Right.
And where the business side of this comes in is being able to take that original and create a file of it and being able to take that and reproduce it, because
Right.
then we do the heavy lifting on that, when it comes to the reproduction
Right.
side of it. You've done your piece, we do our piece, and then the client gets their copy essentially.
Right.
So how are you creating those files? What is your method of creating that to be able to be reproduced? And I know you and I
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit earlier, but what are you doing to get images that print this well?
Right. So there's a couple things. So there's a flatbed scanner that's here in Minneapolis, actually, that is one of the largest in the country, and it can scan 800 dots per inch at least, minimum, I think. And so it gives just a really, really good high quality scan, but then there's a whole team of artists also that are looking at that, and they're correcting anything that doesn't look exactly right. So one thing about my pieces that's a little bit hard to tell from these prints is that they're very textural.
Yep.
I will throw glitter on them. I'll, sometimes broken glass, metal. There's all kinds of different things that are on these pieces. Not so much on the bird ones, but a lot on the ocean ones. So I want to have a lot of reflection that is in those pieces, because I think underwater things catch light like that. So it's really helpful that that team is looking at it, the image, and making sure they're piecing it all together and making it look cohesive,
Right.
so that there's a shadow where a shadow would be, and it still creates that look of texture. So that's one way.
Okay.
There's another scanner of that same, I can't remember the name of the scanner, I wish I could right now, maybe it'll come to me, but there's another one that's in Houston. There's only a few in the country, but there's one in Houston, and it can do 300 dots per inch, which is still very, very good.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll drive my pieces there, and again, it's a very small family-owned business with artists that look at the piece and they're comparing constantly with the original to make sure it's accurate. And so that process is expensive, but it is really good to have that great image to start with. And now recently I've started working with a photographer, because sometimes I can't get to Houston, I can't get to here, or I have a really big piece that would be very challenging to do. And so I've just started working with a photographer that is trying to do that same thing. And photographers can do a really beautiful job, and you wouldn't tell the difference between a scan and the photograph. Because my pieces have so much shimmer and texture, I think it's just that much more challenging.
Right.
But I'm really I'm happy with the results that we're getting so far.
That's awesome. So really, I mean, when it boils down to it, just having that fantastic original file created, because then you have the original, which I'm assuming are very, very expensive, if they're for sale at all. But then you're taking that file and you can do as many, or you can do limited runs, you can control the sizing, the paper options, the surfaces, all that stuff.
That's right.
And that's really where the business end of it comes in.
Yeah, you create a little bit more of a passive income, because you can only make so many originals. But
Right.
I think it also just creates a more affordable way and makes art more accessible for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I'm really excited about, and everybody in this room knows I'm excited about, so we started doing outdoor metal prints about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I've been waiting for somebody to go along with me on like outdoor installations of these and using them not as signage or things like that, but actually putting them outside. And when we were talking, you said, yeah, I have clients that want to do things around the pool since you're in South Padre. And I was like, absolutely. So this is actually an example, and Connor, tell me if this is too reflective. This is an example of one of your pieces, and this is printed on the outdoor metal. And these are rated to be in direct sunlight for years. And I'm really excited to see what your clients and what you think of these when they're out in their environment.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'll have to send you guys some pictures to show you what it looks like. But especially with some of the ocean pieces, having those really big around a pool area. Because that's an extension of their home, that outdoor space. And you know, folks are really getting into decorating their outdoor spaces, their decks. They're picking out their rugs, and they're spending a lot of money on their outdoor furniture, and really wanting to have beautiful gardens and then artwork out there as well. So I'm really excited. Especially, I feel like everyone down there has a pool. All the hotels.
Because it's hot.
It's hot.
And humid.
Yep.
So this one on the back, just so we can show everybody here, this one does have the inset metal frame, but like Shelly was saying earlier, it's really windy in South Padre. So another really good option for this would be to consider doing the corner post too. And then it's just going to have a little hole in each corner that you can choose your post that goes in, and then you've got 4 connection points, essentially to be outside and not have to worry about it blowing off or tipping or doing anything like that. So I'm excited to see, and we're excited to show everybody how this looks printed on the outdoor metal. So that's so cool. So while we're on that subject, let's talk a little bit about pricing.
Okay.
Because pricing your own work is hard. How do you approach that? Like from the reproduction standpoint.
Oh, from the reproduction standpoint. Okay. Well, it kind of coincides a little bit with what the originals cost. So if the originals start out at a certain amount, then I want to make a more affordable option with the prints. So so that's kind of how I look at it. If there's a price point for the original, then I want to make sure I'm coming down, but also making sure that this is an affordable option for me to do. So it still has to make money. So that's probably how I look at that. So
are you okay with sharing like an actual dollar amount? Like if the original is 12,000, then a certain size, like how does that kind of break down?
So I'm trying to think. So I typically like to work in squares. I'm just trying to keep my life easy. I usually try and do about 3 to 4 sizes. So I do 48 by 48s for my originals, and then I've started working in, I think I've done 4 sizes in the print. So I might do a 40 by 40, a 36 by 36, 24 by 24. For me, that just keeps it easy. I know my pricing pretty well. So there's a little bit of differences on my originals because it depends what elements I'm adding to it, what types of materials. I've added Swarovski crystals to my mermaid, and just the crystals were $600 or I think maybe $800 for those. So, and occasionally somebody will want me to embellish a metal print, and I do.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I do, and I'll put crystals on the metal, and it works out really, really well. But so I just have a pricing. So my 40 by 40s are $3,200 is what I sell those at.
For the metal?
That's for the metal, and that's without any embellishments. So it's another $300 to $400 for embellishments on top of that. So that's the 40 by 40 size. And then an original depends now, because the original could be, maybe the original was a 12 by 12, but because the scan is so good, or the image is so good and the print is so good, I can go so much bigger with that.
Got it. So you don't always start with a 48 by 40 original. You may do something small.
Yes.
And then,
Yep. In fact, that was a big one. These were all big ones. But there's a really popular one of mine that is a turtle, and that was just a 12 by 12. And that one is typically sold at the 40 by 40. So, but my original pieces, if I'm working in a 48 by 48, those are usually around $6,000 to $8,000. So then this is almost half price, and there are people that, they'll get a print, and if it's framed out, they're just like, I just can't tell that this wasn't an original, even though it is very different in terms of a smooth surface and a textured surface.
Right.
But they really look so beautiful that, I mean, it's really quality print. It's so good.
Well, we try awful hard.
People love them. So.
Well, and thinking about it from a consumer standpoint, 3,000 or 3,200 versus 6,000 or 8,000, that's a big difference.
Yes, but if we hold this up too, the other thing is, this is very, very contemporary. It has that really glossy surface. It's very thin. It hangs very flat to a wall. It's lightweight. So it really works well in creating a really contemporary look. And if somebody would have one original at 6,000 or potentially two of these, or they need three, in fact, then they're going to go with this. So.
Yeah, for sure. And something that we were talking about earlier too, a lot of your clients are coming in and saying, they're looking at a huge print and saying, do you have anything larger? Which is a fantastic question to have. We can go up to 47 by 95, for a solid metal print essentially. But like we were talking about, you could always do multiples, and your work looks so beautiful together. You could do different pieces, or with the file being what it is, you could start to dissect it and change things.
I really want to try that out too.
And collage the single image and make it huge, for that.
That's another one I'm going to try.
Yeah,
send you a picture of that.
Yeah, for sure. And before we let you go here, something that you said on the original call, and we use it as inspiration for the title of the live that we're doing right now, and I really think that you embody this in not only your art, in your personality, in your community building, and helping others, growing better and better, not bigger and bigger.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why I like working with you all. Even though you have gotten bigger, I feel like there's still that, when you call, you're going to get in touch with someone. You're going to talk to a real person, and almost everything feels like a big box company nowadays. You're always going through a phone tree. Somebody will call you back in an hour. So having real people to work with is just really, really nice. And there is the personal touch. I mean, the lollipop when you get a print.
We have Mike to thank for that.
We have people that live for that at my gallery. So it's just the nice personal touches I really, really love. And I feel that's what also I want to create, that there's an exchange that happens when people engage with art. And there's lots of research that says, your endorphins go way up, all your feel-good chemicals, it's like you just went for a run. It actually triggers the same part of your brain as looking at someone you're in love with. So there's all kinds of really amazing things. I think we just barely know how art impacts us. But it's something that I think is really beautiful and sacred. And I'm not really interested in becoming a giant, huge business. I don't ever really want to sell it and it becomes a big corporate gallery, for example, because I want there to be that personal connection. So I think we will expand. We're kind of in that space to do that now in some ways, but I always want it to be about helping somebody connect with a piece of art and with an artist.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's awesome. It's very cool that you're so approachable in your career, and you're teaching, and you're available, and you're helping people grow. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So thank you for being here with us. We really, really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you joining us today. Again, just as a reminder, make sure to subscribe to our WHCC YouTube. Hit follow for the Instagram at WHCC Pro for all your questions about WHCC products, sizing, options, details, all that kind of stuff. Hit up WHCC.com. I'm Matt. We really appreciate you being with us today. It's easy for me to say. And we'll talk to you at the next one. Thanks so much.